Hello everyone, welcome back to Lawfren. This is Surya Prakash, and in this session, we'll be continuing our NLSAT 2027 ka free course. In the previous videos, we started with our LR1 lecture and we also delved into our Part A with the A1 lecture. In this video, we'll start our dedicated Part B essay lecture, and this will be the 6 lecture long series wherein we'll be talking about how do you go ahead and conceptualize your idea while writing an essay, what are the prerequisites while writing an essay, what is the difference between a descriptive essay and an argumentative essay, and कुछ ground rules जो तुम लोगों को दिमाग में रखने चाहिए when you are going to write an argumentative essay. As in जैसे भी क्वेश्चन पढ़ते हो स्ट्रेट अप जंप नहीं करना आंसर करने के लिए, कुछ चीज़ें सोचनी है, क्रॉस चेक करना है कि इफ़ आई एम थिंकिंग करेक्टली, इफ दिस इज विद इन द क्या लिमिट्स इन विच आई शुड थिंक, इफ इट इज़ एज पर द वे आई शुड थिंक. ये सारी चीज़ें छोटी छोटी चीज़ें देखनी रहती हैं. तो इस लेक्चर में हम वही करेंगे. विल सी दोज थिंग्स एंड यस, लेट्स गो अहेड एंड सी दिस. So we are at lecture number E1. We will be having 5 more lecture, E2 to E6, and we'll be learning about argumentative essays in great depth in those lectures. First, let's start with E1. So understand the condition you are actually writing the essay. Realistically, you are having 15 minutes to write the essay. If I be even more realistic, calculating for like fallouts, calculating for like any mishaps that happen, you have 12 minutes to write an essay. Roughly, they want around 550 to 600 words. Let's hold a very reasonable and arithmetic average of 575 words. 575 words matlab around 2 to 2.25 pages will be your essay. Okay. So understand that nobody writes 600 good words in 15 minutes by writing faster. What you need to do is write them by deciding faster. You cannot write 600 good words by writing faster. You need to pre-decide and decide what are the things that you need to put in your essay before writing so that you write those 600 good words. It's not about how fast you write. Obviously, it's about writing speeds matter, your RPM matters, your WPM matters. But you also need to understand that you need to have a path in mind. You need to have a few structured set of arguments and rebuttals in mind. You need to know कि किस discipline से मुझे कोई भी issue को, societal issue को manage करना है, analyze करना है. And if you have all of those things in your mind, it is very easy for you to go ahead and write an essay. So let me tell you what all things do they look for in your essay. So your essay is not actually marked, and this is something that is coming out of, let's say, my experience, because from how generally students at Lawfren write their essays and how they are marked in the Part B section. From what I understand, generally you are not marked well if your essays are very eloquent per se. You are not marked in a very flowery way. If your, let's say, your essays have the quotations of so on and so forth, the thinkers, and they're very ornamental in the sense. Your essays are marked across 4 rubrics. Those look something like this. The breadth. Can you pull 2 or 3 different strands of public debate in one answer? Not repetition. Breadth as in what are the various aspects, what are the various disciplines that you cover in one essay. The opposition, do you engage with the other side honestly and then show your own judgment of the opposition side? The support, are the arguments held up by something, or are, and does the essay actually decide on something, lead to something, or are they like very pretty much like bogus arguments, for the lack of any better word? And how creative it is. Creativity, you can also say depth की कितने different disciplines के साथ deal करते हुए कितने depth में गए हो in each of those disciplines. So notice what is absent. There is no mark for vocabulary, for quotation, for how moved the reader was, how convincing your stuff was. It does not need that your essay is very beautifully written. It needs to have, as I said, these 4 things: breadth of arguments, then opposition, then support, and like some kind of like structure, and then your creative touch. So let me show you what is the difference between a descriptive essay and an argumentative essay. Read these 2 excerpts, you'll be able to understand. A descriptive essay talks something like this. Article 19(1)(a) guarantees freedom of speech. Article 19(1)(b) guarantees right to assemble peacefully. Let's say we are talking about right to protest. In those lines, read this. both are subject to reasonable restrictions. Protest has been a feature of Indian public life since the freedom movement. Our freedom movement is the byproduct of a protest, year long, continent long protest spread across decades, and courts have repeatedly been asked to balance it against public order. This is a descriptive paragraph. Do you know how to make it argumentative? Here I have written it for you guys. A right to protest that may be exercised only when nobody is inconvenienced is not a right. It is a permission. The state should therefore restrict assemblies by time, place, and manner, and never by the content of the grievance. And because inconvenience is temporary, while a content filter is permanent. Do you do you understand what did I aim to say herein? In this paragraph, it is descriptive in the sense that it draws its authority from, let's say, constitutional articles. That इस article के हिसाब से मेरे पास freedom of speech है, इस article के हिसाब से मेरे पास peaceful assembly का right है, and historically भी अपना जो देश है वो तो इसी से बना है. Argument कहाँ है? तुमने बोला क्या? Put your flair into the argument. Say this thing कि अगर if you are making protest by the, if you are filtering out protest by the content, it is no more like a right. It is a permission granted by the state, and it is not that right is something that we get against the state. So against, depending upon if it is a positive or a negative right, right is something that we sheath ourselves against the capricious actions of the state. So यही चीज यहाँ पे लिखी है. Protest को, if we like start filtering it out based on the content of the protest, it's more like a permission. So restrictions, see herein भी एक line थी कि all of these are subject to reasonable restrictions. Herein I characterize that, as we always use this tool in our Part B legal answer writing. Herein I characterized it by stating that okay, restrictions can happen as insofar time, place, and everything is related to, but you can never take it away completely or screen protest based upon the content of the grievance. So, well, yeah, both the paragraphs are true, but one makes an argument, other describes. You need to follow this. Also, since I'm mentioning it here, also you need to understand that in lieu of argumentating or in lieu of arguing, you do not go ahead and, let's say, make your piece rhetoric, sarcastic. This nahi, ye nahi hua to ye kyun hua. You get my the logic I'm trying to pull. Do not make your piece rhetoric in the sense that you are not putting out any content, but rather doing whataboutery. If this is also problematic, why not we are dealing with that other thing which is also problematic? That is not how you build your case. That is not how you build a strong case. In the previous slide, we discussed it in the, we discussed it under the head of, support. Just because you are taking up the opposition side ka strongest counter argument, strongest rebuttal, and framing it against a counter argument, you also need to show support for your argument. It does not work that way ki okay, if I only weaken the other side, I win. You also have to build upon something. Uske liye you'll have to show stuff. So let's get deeper into the lecture. It's just a caution warning, that a caution or note that you guys need to have with yourself. But yes, as we get deeper into the lecture. So 3 questions for every sentence you put down. What are the 3 questions that you should keep in your mind to check whether a line is argumentative enough or whether a line is descriptive? These are the 3 questions. Can an informed person disagree with the sentence? If nobody can, it is a background, not an argument. If an informed person cannot disagree with a statement, then it is a descriptive one. It is a fact. Does not mean that you should not state any fact. You should. But a fact should be supporting an argument. A fact should not be preceding the argument. ये दिमाग में रखो. फैक्ट जो तुम बोलोगे वो तुम्हारे आर्ग्यूमेंट के सपोर्ट में होना चाहिए. फैक्ट बता के उसके ऊपर आर्ग्यूमेंट मत करो. क्योंकि अंडरस्टैंड द लॉजिक. चेक कौन करने वाला है? एग्जामिनर. एग्जामिनर क्या चेक करेगा? वो क्वेश्चन जो उसने खुद बनाए होंगे और कमिटी ऑफ एग्जामिनर से बनाई होंगी. उन्होंने उस सब्जेक्ट पे सफिशिएंटली रीड करके ही वो क्वेश्चन बनाया होगा. वो तुमसे 10 गुना ज़्यादा जानते हैं. उनको स्टैटिक फैक्ट्स मत खिलाओ. उनको फैक्ट्स के ऊपर के आर्ग्यूमेंट खिलाओ. और तब टू शो कि हाँ, मैं आर्ग्यूमेंट थिनर में नहीं घुमा रहा हूँ, मेरे पास कुछ है, तब फैक्ट्स डालो. ठीक है. तो वैसे चेक करना है कि इफ योर लाइन इज लाइक आर्ग्यूमेंटेटिव एनफ और नॉट. सेकेंडली, डज इट चेंज व्हाट आई ओ टू द रीडर? A working sentence creates an obligation. Decoration creates nothing. As in repetition की चीज़ है कि मैं जो समझाना चाहता हूँ kya it in any ways adds to the previous sentence? One argument I have made. The second argument, is it distinct? Is it adding anything new to what the reader will know? Or like it is just pressing upon it even more? And if I delete it, does the answer get any weaker? This is like a filtering theory, but generally we teach it because it needs to be taught. But understand that this filtering theory you cannot imply while writing an essay under a time constraint. Still, then, with practice, you start to write essays under 8 minutes, 8.5 minutes, and when you start doing that, therein we will be taking this thing up, and this needs a lot of mentorship and guidance as well to like keep all of this in the go, all of these in the circle. So this is something that I do not impress upon it a lot. Do not impress upon it a lot in this YouTube lecture, because ये क्या है ना, ये interactive बहुत सी चीज़ें होती हैं. कौन सी चीज़ें important थी, कौन सी चीज़ें important नहीं थी. It's number one a matter of subjectivity, and again, to like check some fact or some argument on that spectrum of importance, you need to get it checked by mentors, and वो बताएंगे what one mentor might say something else, others should say something else. You need to derive a mean of the likability across different kind of people, so that तुमको ही पता नहीं कैसा examiner आ सकता है. So yeah, I guess I spoke too much on this. If we move on to the time stamps that you should keep in your mind while writing an essay, understand कि बेस्ट केस सिनारियो पे चल रहे हैं हम अभी, हमारे पास 15 मिनट है, तो पहले तो 3 मिनट डिसाइड करो कि क्या लिखना है. कुछ मत लिखना स्टेट ये आंसर शीट पे, ना ही स्टांस, ना ही डेफिनेशन, ना ही आर्ग्यूमेंट, कुछ मत लिखना. पहले 3 मिनट डिसाइड करना. ये डिसाइडिंग के 3 मिनट जनरली decreases to 1 minute and 20 seconds or somewhere around 1 minute with practice and in the actual exam as well, because by then जो ऐसे तुम देखोगे in the question paper वो already तुम practice कर चुके होगे. तो तुम्हें essentially क्या करना है कि बस mind map बनाना है, and sometimes in the rough sheet of the paper you jot down, okay, this point, this point, this point, ये counterpoint है, counterpoint, conclusion, fact, ऐसे. फिर 10 मिनट लो लिखने के लिए. again it shortens to 7 minutes for writing the essay in the actual exam. And वही conclusion करो, कुछ काटना है तो काट लो. Whenever you are deleting something from your answer, be very careful. ऐसे don't scribble on your paper, it looks very nasty. Just a plain straight line. If your handwriting is big, 2 plain straight lines, preferably with a pen of different ink. If you have written the entire page in blue color ka pen, do it in the black color ka pen. Keep it very clean, keep your paper clean to the extent possible, because that way it creates an impression in the mind of the examiner ki okay, it is like a reasoned choice, not a last minute scribble. So 5 lines that you should keep in the rough sheet. As we discussed here, in KSS rough sheet mein you need to have like a proper proper chart out ready. What all things need to be there? Your stance in 1 line, the 2 words in the like question that you're going to define, because you need to do that as well. We'll discuss these things more as we go on, proceed further, and discuss about, let's say, the structure of the essay, the various parts. Argument A, the mechanism. Argument B, the mechanism. And the objection, then how do you go ahead and defend the objection? So word budget, we generally this is something that it is not very binding on you guys for right now, but as you go on, you have some kind of idea कि okay, मुझे introduction इतने words में लिखना है. I need to write introduction within this many lines of the page. Then I have to write in these many lines. What happens when you like break the page into boxes and try to fill content as per those boxes, and you keep on practicing that for months, the benefit you reap out of this is you are not immediately staggered when you come across a question. You know how much things you have to write, हर हेड के अंदर क्या क्या लिखना है, कैसे लिखना है और कितना लिखना है, you know. This is obviously not binding. Some let's say some essays, some topics may demand more content on argument A than argument B, and argument A needs to be put on first because it is like a precondition for argument B. So you cannot shift stuff therein, but again, you need to have like a budget in your mind and practice sheet ready for essays. So 2 examples. One is argument with a longer word count, one is argument with a shorter word count. So देखते हैं. So see, what all things the mind में क्या सब तुम्हारे रहना चाहिए while you are making an argument. Number 1 is right. What is a person owed? Number 2 is consequence. What actually happens if we do this? Number 3 is institutional. Who should be deciding this? Which is the institution that we are like pushing against? The distributive part. who carries the cost, and lastly the comparative. If this is like broken, how would another system fix it? Let me show you this with the example. So what exactly is this thesis? Whenever you're given a question, I understand this lecture might seem to you like very structural in the sense, very conditional in the sense, but this might only seem to you, aisa tumhe tabhi lagega, this might only seem to you when, let's say, you have not seen how actually an LSAT ka essay question looks like, and how do you go ahead and solve it. Understand, एक क्वेश्चन देख के आओ, थोड़ा सॉल्व करके आओ, उसके बाद यू विल बी एबल टू अंडरस्टैंड ये सब जो बड़े बड़े वर्ड्स फेंक रहा हूँ, स्ट्रक्चर फेंक रहा हूँ, ये सब क्या है. सो तुम्हें दिमाग में पहले तो बैठाना पड़ेगा तुम्हारा स्टांस क्या होने वाला है, बिकॉज ऐसे आस्क्स यू टू टेक अ स्टांस, तो स्टांस लेके ही बेटा आर्ग्यू करना है, तो स्टांस क्या होने वाला है, और स्टांस के लिए कंडीशन क्या तुम बनाओगे थ्रू योर डेफिनेशंस, और रीजनिंग क्या दोगे. तो वीक स्टांस कैसे होता है देखो. In my opinion, protests are important in a democracy, but they should be regulated properly. It is a whining stance. Common man रोने वाला ये लग रहा है. It is very generic in the sense. You need to be very specific. See, stance बताना है, condition बताना है, और reason बताना है. ये देखो. The state should permit large protests and restrict them by time, place, and manner only. ठीक है. The state should permit large scale protests. Stance, protest should be permitted. Condition, ठीक है, and reason, because the harm to a non-protester is diffuse and temporary, while harm to a permission power is concentrated and permanent. समझ गए. You do not go ahead and put your stance, the entire point of your essay in one line कि I believe कि regulation हो जाना चाहिए. भाई कौन सा regulation, कैसा regulation, उसके लिए you need to put this thing in place कि yes, state should do this, but conditions, because no absolute statements. There is no absolute fundamental right, because a right which is absolute will absolutely deter another from exercising their right. So उसमें condition लगाएंगे, specific conditions लगाएंगे, that will be a creative solution. And lastly, what we will be doing, like we'll be putting up the reason why we are aiming to do this. Kind of reasoning भी लगा दी कि एक नॉन प्रोटेस्टर को जो हार्म हो रहा है वो डिफ्यूज्ड हार्म है, टेम्पोररी है, बट ये परमिशन पावर क्या होगी, कंसंट्रेटेड हो जाएगी इफ वी नीड टू टेक क्या ग्रीवेंस स्पेसिफिक परमिशन फ्रॉम द स्टेट फॉर एवरी काइंड ऑफ प्रोटेस्ट. सो 5 लिंक है. पहले क्लेम करना है, क्लेम को रीजन से ऐड ऑन करना है, रीजन को मैकेनिज्म, you need to put up mechanisms in the essay. Essays are kind of different, like let's say your legal answer writing. Essays may you can put up previous elements, you can put up famous cases, you can put those stuff, and that will come under your evidencing part. And lastly, you can put up the consequence. So how it happens, see, you put on the assertion, sorry guys, you put on the assertion that protest should be allowed because democracy requires dissent. Reason you add, protest should be allowed because elections are too infrequent and courts too slow to register a grievance. ठीक है. Mechanism add करना है. Government that pays no visible cost for ignoring a grievance has no reason to price it. Protests work by making an ignored grievance expensive in attention, which is the one currency an elected government cannot decline. So ये 3 चीजें. Herein previously we talked about this. Sorry. कि claim रहेगा तुम्हारा, reason रहेगा, mechanism रहेगा. These 3 things are distinct, not extensions. These are connected, but not extensions of each other. See how it works out herein. कि पहले तो stance रह गया तुम्हारा यहाँ पे. Protest should be allowed because in a democracy dissent is very necessary. उसके बाद protest should be allowed because election, number A, elections बहुत बड़े बड़े गैप्स में होते हैं और कोर्ट्स आर स्लो. तो अगर कोई ग्रीवेंस है विच नीड्स इमीडिएट अटेंशन, हाउ डू वी मेक इट दैट इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर द लेजिस्लेशन और फॉर लेट्स से द एग्जीक्यूटिव टू सी, उसके लिए प्रोटेस्ट आर नेसेसरी. एंड मैकेनिज्म क्या है, क्यों प्रोटेस्ट इज द ओनली वे आउट, बिकॉज अ गवर्नमेंट दैट पेज नो विजिबल कॉस्ट फॉर इग्नोरिंग अ ग्रीवेंस. एक ग्रीवेंस को इग्नोर करने के लिए जब गवर्नमेंट बिना किसी ये गवर्नमेंट इज नॉट held liable for ignoring any particular grievance, then why should the people be liable for going ahead putting forth that grievance? ठीक है ना, बिकॉज गवर्नमेंट के इग्नोर करने से भी पब्लिक ऑर्डर हार्म हो रहा है, ग्रीवेंस इज नॉट डिसअपियरिंग. सो व्हाई शुड पीपल हैव अ रेस्ट्रिक्शंस अपॉन them to like go ahead and show this grievance? So इसके लिए to hold the elected government more accountable, we should have the right to protest. So good and bad argument के बीच में comparison. Good argument could be false, but what you can say would falsify it. मतलब है गलत हो सकता है, but you have good justification for it. You have a mechanism for it. You survive the counter argument. You carry one example and you concede something as well. That okay, we understand that public order will be harmed in the case of protest, but the same reasoning I gave, public order, the harm happening to public order is identical on both sides. However, for one harm, the government is not held accountable. The other harm, the people are held accountable by taking away from them the right to protest, which is the constitutional right. So, वही है. What are the various mistakes that you can do? The consensus claim. Democracy requires participation. Nobody is on the other side. So the sentence cannot be argued, only agreed with. ठीक है. Make claims wherein other side can argue with them as well, and do not prove too much. That if you go ahead and say that absolutes mein argument mat karo, essentially if you go ahead and say that protest should happen without any restrictions, no, put on conditions. And eventually if we allow this, eventually the whole right will collapse. This is like really unrealistic. This like demeans the entire necessity of courts. Do not do that, but rather state that this will be a very bad impact on the particular jurisprudence of that right. So these are the various tricks that you can put up. So again, word choice. Understand, you need to be very careful with your words. You should not be repetitive. To be argumentative means that you need to be precise. So see, there are two paragraphs here. एक है 48 words का, एक है nearly उसके half 26 words का, which I have written. It is important to note that in the context of modern digital era, a number of very significant concerns have been raised by various stakeholders with regard to the question of whether artificial intelligence systems ought to be permitted to take decisions which affect human lives. ठीक है, इतना बड़ा ये इसमें डिस्क्राइब किया मॉडर्न एरा, डिजिटल एरा. पता है यार, हम उसी में हैं. Machines already decide who gets the credit, bail, and an interview. The question is not whether they decide, but which of their decisions we are willing to leave unappealable. Simple. Ye choice of words, very critical choice of words. How do you do that? Throat clearing words hata do. It is important to note, needless to say in today's world. Remove all of these things. Then empty prepositions with regard to the question becomes whether. Nahi, see the whether. Nominalization. The implementation of becomes implementing. The implementation को implementing बना दो. Intensify, very significant, extremely crucial. What is this? What is extremely and crucial? No. Second example, वे सब मत दो. So a lot of words will be saved. So yes, how do you take up the other side? If your counter is easy, it is because you chose the easy counter. Take the hard counter and take the counter you can beat by conceding something. ठीक है. उसके बाद 4 ways to answer an objection you would respect. Number 1, concede. Accept the objection and shrink the domain. Like true of indefinite occupation, not only of a Sunday march, that we very specifically seen in like football matches ka scenario. What it exactly means, like yes, it is true, like the squatter rights are very important, it is true, but we understand that squatter rights are important, but can there be squatter rights in, like, let's say apartments which are actively occupied by people who are only away for like weekend works, something like that. Compare the cost, that the harm, show that if there is a harm, how that harm is also there in the other side as well, and how the harm on the other side is much more worse off than herein. तो वही है. And yes, in conclusion, do not summarize. Go ahead and write in this format. So my stance was provided condition. This means that accepting this would happen. So do not summarize at what all things that we discussed. Say that yes, my stance is now proved because argument A breaks the mechanism in this part, argument B breaks the mechanism in that part. So these are the various types of questions that I asked you. Like we discussed the various types of questions that I asked you in, let's say, part A, B, legal answer writing. These are the various kinds of questions that I asked you in essay writing. There are various ways to deal with this, and we will be discussing these things in future lectures. With that said, guys, This was Surya from Lawfren. This was Essay Lecture 1. See you guys in another lecture. And as I always say, aim to be.
Are you preparing for 3-year LLB entrance exams but feeling overwhelmed and unsure where to start? Do you struggle with finding the right resources, guidance and clarity, all in one place? Tired of institutions selling just mock tests or rebranding old materials meant for other exams and charging a fortune for it? Introducing Lawfren, your one-stop solution for 3-year LLB entrance exams. Lawfren brings you cutting-edge tools to supercharge your preparation. With our exams portal, you can participate in live All India tests and instantly see your rank, giving you real-time insights into your performance. Practice questions on individual topics, sharpen your skills, and get exam ready with confidence. Lawfren, aim to be.